Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jason Lichtman, and I'm going to be your host for today. Today's webinar topic, what the ERP is an MES solution. We're going to be demystifying production tracking acronyms and what they mean for you. Before I begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today, we are going to be talking about a lot of things in our products, and I want to make sure that you're all aware that if at some point I mention anything that is not yet available in our product, any purchasing decisions or investment decisions should be based on what is available today and not what might become available in the future. Thank you so much. For today's agenda, we have a lot to cover. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me as a presenter. I'm going to give you an overview of data and process at a typical business. I'm going to give you definitions of all the acronyms that you saw in the webinar description. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how each of these systems affects your business. Of course, I'm going to cover the differences between these different systems. And I'm going to give you an introduction to Autodesk Prodsmart. Lastly, I'm going to show you and tell you how you can reach the Prodsmart team for more information, for a trial, and a whole bunch more. So with that, let's begin. As I mentioned a few moments ago, my name is Jason Lichtman. I'm a senior technical sales specialist for design and manufacturing here at Autodesk. I come from a background in mechanical engineering, both for my bachelor's and my master's degrees, and I spent a little over 10 years in consumer product design, development, and manufacturing. I now work at Autodesk, of course. I've spent the last 5 years at Autodesk learning about our customers' needs, and based on those needs, helping them see how Autodesk solutions can help improve their business. And I'm hoping that today's webinar is going to do exactly the same. So with that, let's talk a little bit about a typical business like yours. This is how most companies are set up. They operate in functional silos. Department heads, they set up processes using whatever tools are available, typically Excel, email, and a bunch of other pretty basic tools. Little attention is paid to how information flows across the enterprise. While individuals may be organized, processes that involve people and information from multiple functions or departments, they are chaotic and inconsistent. The question becomes, how chaotic? And I'll show you. This is what it starts to look like when you realize how the data flows across those departments. The product information, which is the lifeblood for manufacturers, is hard to find, it's often outdated, and it's difficult to interpret. This leads to all sorts of problems, and perhaps more importantly, low morale, difficulty hiring, and retaining the best people. Most companies aren't even aware of the layers of redundancy and the slack that they've built into their business as usual process. It's pretty unfortunate. And as a result of all of this, all sorts of more specific problems arise, like missed deadlines, bottlenecks, low profit margins, excessive scrap or waste, traceability issues, and lastly, raw material procurement and raw material sourcing, something that has become especially important in the last several years. And I'll tell you, there are lots of solutions that can solve some, if not all of these problems. The challenge, though, is that these solutions I mentioned are really hard to understand. They're really hard to understand which solutions solve which of these problems, and you have to understand what these acronyms actually mean in the first place, right? So what we're going to try to do today is to really uncover what these acronyms are, what they mean, and how they affect your business. So let's start with some basics. I promise you some definitions, and I'm definitely going to give you that today. The first one is going to be PDM. PDM stands for Product Data Management. And you're going to see in a lot more detail in a few moments what that really means. But just know that PDM is Product Data Management. PLM is going to be Product Lifecycle Management. Again, we're going to uncover what that really means in just a few minutes. ERP is Engineering Resource Planning. MRP is Material Resource Planning. And lastly on the list for today, MES is Manufacturing Execution System. But like I said, we need to dive deeper to really understand what they mean and how they affect your business. So we're going to go through these one at a time and see what they do within your business, what problems they create if you don't have a system in place, and of course, how they are solved. So let's start at the very beginning. We're going to start with PDM because, in my opinion, it's one of the easier ones to start with. And we're going to go and take a look at some file management practices or lack thereof. So here you can see I have Windows Explorer up. I have a folder with a bunch of SolidWorks files. I come from a background where I used to use SolidWorks on a regular basis, and this is the kind of thing that I saw all the time. The challenge here is that when you look at a folder like this, it's pretty hard to tell which is the latest file. So let's actually go and try to do that together. Is it the bearing flange that's the version 5B, whatever the B means in the version 5? Maybe. Is it the one with the date on it at the very beginning, starting with the year? It looks like this is from September 30th. Probably not. No, it turns out that there's another one from October 23rd, and the formatting is completely different, so they're not in order. That's confusing. It also turns out, actually, there's one from 2 days later, October 25th, and that one's at the beginning of the folder, right? But what about this one? This one's labeled the latest. We've all seen that before. And it must be the latest because that's what it says. But what about this one? This one says final. Which one's actually more up to date, the final or the latest? Beats me. What about this one? This one says final, right? These are the kinds of things that you see very often. I call this organized chaos, although it's not really very well organized. It's mostly just the chaos. Now you can manually try to organize this a little better. So here's an example of a manual process of trying to keep track of this data. And this time it's just a consistent operating procedure. Everything is a version, no dates. And you can tell from this that the one at the very end, the version 27, is the most up-to-date file. But of course, you have all the previous versions in the way, making clutter, so to speak, within your folder structure. Now, keep in mind, I'm only showing one particular file right now. So if you could imagine having an assembly of 300 different components, this could get really messy really fast. So someone that might be a little bit more organized might make a folder that says archive. And maybe they take version 1 through 26 and they shove it in the archive folder, right? It looks something like this. This is already more organized, but the reality is that this is still very much a manual process. And we know that manual processes are prone to all sorts of different errors. So when you don't have a PDM solution in place, it's difficult to know which file is the latest file, even if you're organized. Also keep in mind that one small mistake means that you can accidentally overwrite a previous file, right? An existing version. And once you've done that, the file that represents maybe version 5 is really an imposter, right? It's the wrong name at that point. It's really some other version. A lot of time, by the way, is going to end up being spent identifying or trying to identify the latest file. And that just is a big waste of your resources. And lastly, time and money can often be spent on the wrong file. That's almost even worse than anything else. You know, when I was in industry, there was one example I remember where someone spent 6 weeks designing and then manufacturing an injection mold using the wrong file. That's absolutely horrible. The result is a lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted money. And we all know that we're in a world where we can't really tolerate that kind of stuff. So PDM is going to fix that. And it does this kind of stuff automatically. Autodesk has 2 primary solutions when it comes to PDM. And this is a little bit of a gray area because the reality is that Autodesk Vault Professional is a dedicated PDM solution. That's all it does is product data management. Whereas Autodesk Fusion 360 is really a CAD, CAE or computer aided engineering, plus CAM for computer aided manufacturing platform. It's really meant for designing, analyzing, and manufacturing your parts. But it has built-in data management, so you don't have to rely on a secondary software to be able to do that for the CAD, CAE, and CAM solution, right? So Vault integrates with other design tools and other CAD systems to keep everyone working on a central source of organized data. You can use Vault to increase collaboration and streamline workflows across engineering, manufacturing, and extended teams. And it does a lot of automation for you. It also allows you to control what people can access and what they can edit. You could also track revisions and design history. The key, though, is that for a certain file, like the one I showed earlier, there's really just one file, and the system in the background is keeping track of the older versions. But you're only looking at and working with one file that represents the object, whatever version it happens to be, right? And again, Fusion 360 is going to be the tool that you use for designing, analyzing, and manufacturing. And along the way, it's doing all of that stuff for you. So it's keeping track of your data and your versions. You could always go back and get older versions. But the key here really is that you don't have this organized chaos like I showed you earlier from Windows Explorer. So that covers PDM. Now we get to go on to our second topic, which is going to be PLM. Now, PLM, as I mentioned earlier, is Product Lifecycle Management. PLM solutions manage product development life cycles from conception and design to sampling and production. It's a collaborative solution that allows designers and product developers and engineers to seamlessly integrate data such as colors, size, specs, materials, and communicates that with adjoining team members to ensure that sample changes and any other changes to your design are communicated across the entire team. In a way, PLM is the pre-production tool that brings together the data, people, and processes to aid in I'm talking funny today, to aid in an organization's ability to develop its products. The key here really is this. It does a whole bunch of different things, and it connects all of these things together, all the things you see on the screen. But remember, we just mentioned product data management, and that is actually part of what PLM does. So product data management is really just part of this bigger system of what PLM is really doing. Now, the reason the PLM exists is because most product development systems tend to be in those silos that we showed earlier, right? The data is constantly going back and forth between those different departments. And as a result, data can often slip through the cracks, so to speak. And as a result, you have a bunch of facts that you'll probably hear from various different sources, like what I've heard, which is the 2 months out of every year is just completely wasted time for each engineer. And as a former mechanical engineer myself, I could tell you that makes perfect sense to me. And I'll tell you, as also an engineer, I use so many different systems to be able to get my job done. So what PLM is really trying to do is to connect these systems together so you don't have all of these challenges that come from these disconnected systems, right? You don't want your product missing your cost targets. And right now, 83% of them do, right? Or what about missing your launch date? 79% of products miss their launch date. That's a big deal, you know, and from my experience, it was closer to 100%. But the reality is connecting these disconnected workflows is going to make things better, right? Because this workflow, where you have those different departments all trying to communicate, but having these barriers in between them, that's a big challenge for any company. So the benefits of PLM for a company is that it improves collaboration between those different the connections that we talked about a moment ago. It increases product development agility by connecting everything. It also improves your supply chain agility. It reduces time spent on the low value tasks by automating a lot of this, and it reduces defects and nonconformities in your product. So if you combine this all together, the whole point of this is to take that disconnected workflow I showed a moment ago and to connect it all together. And Autodesk does have a solution that does this. It's called Fusion 360 Manage with Upchain. And if you've been a fan of Autodesk for a while now, you might know that we've had a product called Fusion 360 Manage, formerly called Fusion Lifecycle. And then recently we acquired a company called Upchain that is now part of Autodesk. And so the offering that we now provide is Fusion 360 Manage with Upchain. It takes the best of both of these products and allows you to be able to pick and choose what you're using from each and really connects everything together. But as I mentioned earlier, the three things that we talk about connecting are data, people, and process. You're going to go from disconnected teams like this to very much connected, collaborative teams like you see on the screen. So this covers PLM, at least at a high level. Now let's talk a little bit about your production floor. There is no doubt that managing a production or manufacturing facility is a difficult process. You have to balance production and profitability goals with customer expectations, and doing that in today's environment has become harder than ever. If you look at the processes that are actually involved in doing so, it can get pretty complicated pretty fast. You might start off with quoting a job, and then of course the sales cycle. Eventually you're going to purchase materials. Then you're going to use purchase materials to actually manufacture the product, inspect the product to make sure that it's meeting your requirements, and finally ship this out. Right? But there's a lot more details that goes into all of this. And of course, separate systems that track different areas of this entire workflow. So engineering resource planning is the type of software that connects all of these things together. You can see different departments like production scheduling, HR, accounting, quality management, supply chain management, inventory management, purchasing, and manufacturing itself, or manufacturing execution. ERP ensures products are manufactured in a timely, cost-controlled manner once a product has been designed and approved. This procedure uses a database to automate the various core processes that the company needs related to all of these different departments. And it's seen for larger companies as a catch-all solution to manage the business functions in one central location. So if you think about it, bigger companies tend to invest in ERP solutions. Smaller companies are typically afraid of ERP solutions because you'll see that ERP solutions are much more massive, costly, and time-consuming to implement. But before we can talk about that in more detail, I do have to compare what I'm talking about here for ERP to what I talked about earlier for PLM. So let's compare the two more directly. When it comes to the functions, right? PLM allows design teams to focus on the ideation, the innovation, and the development of the product. Whereas the ERP role is about executing that product and managing that production in a cost-controlled manner. A PLM solution allows design teams to highlight the correlation between each component of a product, while an ERP platform handles the transition of the materials for inventory, production schedules, and logistics. PLM tools are used primarily by technical designers and product developers, whereas ERPs are more often used by manufacturing and operations personnel, right? And you can see all of the various different functions that each does. But the thing that I want to point out is that these are not very well defined, right? So you're going to see PLM solutions that do not all of the things listed. Some PLM solutions will do even more. The same for ERP. You're going to see some ERPs don't do all the things that I listed here, and some do even more. But there is a slight connection between these, or redundancy between these, because oftentimes some of these functions can exist in PLM or can exist in ERP. And they can also exist in both, right? The key here is that the PLM is kind of like the early stages of your design and development, and the ERP is the actual manufacturing of that given design. So it's not like a company would use a PLM solution and that's it, or an ERP solution and that's it. Typically, they can be using both, right? There's an order to this. And the order is as follows, right? You design something typically in CAD, you manage that data using PDM, and you, if you can, you're managing that data in the process of design and development in PLM itself. And then eventually, once that design is frozen, so to speak, this is going to go over to the manufacturing side. And that's where ERP, MRP, and even MES solutions kind of play in. Now, I know I didn't go over the MRP and MES stuff yet, right? I'm talking about the high-level overview of ERP, but I think that this kind of paints the picture of where we're headed. Now, keep in mind that ERP solutions, as I mentioned, are massive. And as a result, there are some major challenges that come with them. For example, they typically take 6 to 18 months to implement MES or legacy MES or these massive ERP solutions. They're also incredibly expensive. Where it gets interesting is that it's not just expensive from a cost of the software perspective, it's also expensive for the cost of implementation and customization or configuration. So these solutions are these very generic solutions. And then in order to customize it or configure it for your business, you typically are paying the maker of the ERP solution or consultants to go and configure this for your needs. And then after all of that is done, user adoption itself is really slow, oftentimes because of insufficient hardware, lack of training, or even a flawed implementation. And I'll add to that, what I think is really interesting is that because it takes so long to implement these solutions, by the time you've actually implemented them, your business needs might have changed so much that the solution doesn't even solve the problems that you now have. So you have to go back and basically start the implementation and the customization all over again. And that can be incredibly frustrating. So let's look again at what I showed you about what engineering resource planning really does. Remember, it connects all of these functions together. But when it comes to production, the reality is that there's one area that is more important than the rest, and that's the manufacturing execution itself. So what MES is all about, and you're going to see this in more detail in a second, is about that execution, like focused on that one area, right? It can actually be a little bit more than just that one area, but focus on this area as a discrete solution to that problem so that you can solve it much, much faster. Now, when we look within manufacturing execution systems, there are workflows that I want to highlight. So we're talking about production order or a work order, gathering the materials, and then executing the production, right? Executing the manufacturing. That's why it's called MES in the first place. And you're going to have various different operations to actually execute to make those parts. But some questions arise when you start looking at this process. How is that process started? How is the product information itself moved across the process? And how is the production itself tracked? Well, most companies out there tend to have a way to track this. Unfortunately, it doesn't work all that well, but they are trying using the tools that they have available to them. So in comes what we call the paper traveler. The paper traveler is a way to track production that's been around for a long time. You print out a piece of paper that has a bunch of information about what the production order is, what the parts are that you're going to make, and the procedures you need to actually execute to make them. And you collect the data along the way following these procedures. So let's actually look at this from a workflow perspective, right? We have a production order, a work order, my materials, and we're going to take that paper traveler and follow it through this entire process. Looks great in principle. It looks great when that paper traveler is blank. But once you start to fill this out, that's when the problems really arise. So this is what it looks like once you start filling out one of these paper travelers. And I'll tell you, oh my gosh, how problematic they can be. Well, first of all, if you have handwriting like me, you might not even be able to read what I put in there. And if you can't read or understand it, what was the point of even filling it out? Also, data itself might be collected along the way, but it's not communicated back to where it matters until the end of production. Once you get that production supervisor signature at the bottom, right at the end of the workflow. Now, that delayed data capture means delayed visibility, which means delayed problem solving. And most manufacturers out there, they encounter problems on a regular basis. And the most important thing is about you want to prevent those problems, but when they do occur, you want to be able to deal with them as quickly as possible. And also, based on these paper travelers, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to analyze the bigger picture of what's happening, right? To actually use that data to try to figure out where those bottlenecks are and to alleviate them. To be able to be audit ready in minutes, right? If you're a medical device manufacturer, you're going to need to be able to make reports that show all of the production information that you've collected, and paper travelers are not exactly sufficient for that kind of thing. So a proper MES solution or manufacturing execution system is going to take this entire process and give it a whole lot more clarity. It's going to digitize it to be able to allow you to have a closed feedback loop system so that you can see the problems as they are arising and deal with them immediately. And then once you have all this data, you can also analyze this data to be able to improve upon your system and make your business even more efficient. All right, so that's what an MES does within ERP. But I do think it's important to clarify some differences between them. So remember that MES is going to focus on managing and monitoring the production process on the factory floor. ERP is going to provide a broader view of the business, which includes other areas of the business that MES doesn't cover, such as accounting, HR, and a whole bunch of other things too, right? MES is going to give you real-time visibility of what's happening on the shop floor, including real-time reports, up-to-date information of production progress, and if something, of course, is going to be late. ERP typically does periodic reports, daily, weekly, monthly. It can sometimes also do real-time, but generally we're talking about bigger picture, kind of looking at it a little bit more sporadically. Now, also pointing out here that MES is going to be much more affordable. ERP is typically way more expensive. And MES, being a more localized, focused, targeted solution, is going to be much faster to implement, whereas ERP is much slower to implement. Now, Autodesk, of course, has an MES solution that is being offered, right? That's Prodsmart. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Prodsmart and how it fits into all of this and solves the production problems that you might face at your business. So Prodsmart is all about a single source of truth for your whole business with your shop floor at its core. And we're going to cater to two different demographics of people that are going to need to interact with, create, or view data. Your back office, which could be your production managers, directors, operations, purchasing, and even scheduling. Your factory floor, which could be your general workers, CNC operators, your assemblers, could be almost anyone on the factory floor. Now, keep in mind that all of these people are going to be able to interact with the data on almost any device they want, whether it's a computer, PC, or Mac, whether it's a tablet, whether that's an iPad or an Android device, and of course, a smartphone. And we make it so that you can access the data from any of these devices, but also that it's optimized for the device in question. So you're going to have a much easier time looking at the data on a tablet or a smartphone because it's going to be simplified, right? It makes it easier for someone on the production floor to interact with the data. Now, doing all of this is going to give you three primary data. Using Prodsmart is going to give you three primary values, right? These aren't features. These are the values that it brings you. The first is that it's going to automate and digitize your manufacturing process. By doing that, it's going to give you real-time visibility of what's happening on your shop floor, what the current status is of all your orders, whether something is going to be late or not. It's also going to be able to give you longer-term analytics to help you improve the efficiency of your business, to be able to identify your bottlenecks. It could be that Rob, who's answering the chat in the back of this webinar, that Rob, maybe one of my factory floor workers, tends to be less efficient than the rest of my employees. I want to be able to run a report to find that so that I can have a chat with Rob about upping his efficiency. Conversely, I might want to use these longer-term analytics to be able to pinpoint that when I manufacture my product, while I might have 3 machines that can produce it, it turns out that one of my machines has a higher scrap rate than the rest. Maybe there's something wrong with the machine that I can address and reduce my scrap rate and therefore increase my profits for my company, right? These are really valuable to any company. The key here, though, is that the first 2 of these benefits, you'll get that right away by using Prodsmart. The last one does require data to build up over time. That makes perfect sense, of course, right? You're collecting the data along the way, and then once you have that data, you could use it to analyze what's happening in your shop or your production floor. Now, there are a lot of features that Prodsmart does, right? You know, it's modular and flexible. We talked about that already. It gives you real-time inventory and production tracking. It gives you instant data capture from your tablet or your smartphone. And it also does things like quality control and traceability and material resource planning, right? So the material resource planning is all about knowing what materials you're going to need so that you can order them well in advance and get them in time for when you need them, right? And so Prodsmart is going to be able to do that as well. It's going to give you the current inventory that you have right now, but based on production orders that are coming in and based on purchase orders of materials that you've ordered, you're going to be able to see how the materials are going, like the inventory is going to change over time so that you can plan accordingly. I think that's super important. Now, just some snapshots of what it looks like inside Prodsmart. This is our dashboard in Prodsmart that's going to give you the real-time visibility of what's happening on the shop floor at this very moment. Here you're looking at some production orders that we have in our account, and you could see the current status of any of these orders and whether they're going to be delayed or not. You can also take a look at scheduling and see what the scheduling is going to be like for the next week, the next month, the next 6 months. Right? The whole point here is that it's not just about being able to track what's being produced today, but being able to plan for it as well. Here you could see our inventory levels, and then now you can start to see the material resource planning of how those inventory levels will change over time based on my production orders, my purchase orders, and a variety of other factors. When it comes to real-time visibility, here's a great example where you can see which of your employees are currently working, which ones are available, and which ones are on holiday or sick, right? You're going to get all of this visibility in one place. And because you have the data all in Prodsmart, you can start to do analytics to start to identify those bottlenecks that we talked about earlier, to be able to see productivity rates by employee, productivity rates by jobs, productivity rates by products that you're working on. Now, the key here for the Prodsmart solution is that we're able to do this much faster and more affordably than the ERP solutions that we talked about earlier. But I'll admit, the line between what the MES solution is and the ERP solution is a little bit blurred because Prodsmart doesn't just do MES, it does more than that as well. But yet, it is able to be installed and implemented incredibly quickly. On average, we take about 3 business days to get you up and running in Prodsmart on your first production order. That's a really big deal. That's important. I'll also add that implementation is included with your Prodsmart subscription. And that means that you don't have to worry about inflated costs for hiring consultants or some other third party to be able to actually configure the system to work at your business. We're all about trying to get you up and running as quickly as possible, and that means helping you along the way. And once we've set this up for you, of course, it means that adoption is going to be much faster as well, because we include modern interfaces and device compatibility so that you can just start using this on your shop floor right away. Now, big picture, I do want you to see where this fits into the goal that we're trying to achieve here at Autodesk. Fusion 360, the CAD, CAE, and CAM solution that we talked about earlier, is more about the upfront design and analysis and programming for manufacturing before you get to the manufacturing itself. Prodsmart is about planning and scheduling and shop floor management. And in case you haven't heard, we recently acquired a company called Simco, and that means that machine communications is now a possibility for our future. So there's a lot in store for what's available. It's hard for me to actually show you all of this in just some PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to show you a very brief video that's going to tell you a little bit more about what Prodsmart and what it offers. And then we'll close out by showing you how you can actually learn more, start a trial, and even get in touch with the Prodsmart team here at Autodesk. So give me just one moment. I'm going to go and make sure that you're going to be able to hear the audio for this video that I'm about to show you. And let's begin.
Operating a production facility can be complicated, with a constant need to monitor everything from raw materials through to finished goods. To help address the challenges, production managers look to manufacturing execution systems, or MES, to track their production processes. But often these can be expensive to set up, painful to integrate, and under-deliver on addressing their true needs. Autodesk Prodsmart is different. Prodsmart is a go-anywhere, use-anywhere, cloud-connected MES and light enterprise resource planning system, which capitalizes on the use of web browsers and mobile devices for operation. This minimizes the IT overhead needed to get you up and running sooner and gives you the flexibility to start managing your production data today and adapt to your business as it grows. Focus on what's important, like monitoring your operations through production tracking dashboards and audit-ready quality compliance reports fed by real-time information collected from the shop floor, making it easy to visualize your production efficiency all the way from orders to shipping. Manage your teams, machines, and materials to optimize your production capacity and increase manufacturing throughput with material and resource planning, helping to minimize waste and reduce the environmental impact of your business. With scheduling for preventive or corrective machine maintenance to reduce production downtime. And integrate with upstream or downstream resource planning, customer relationships, and product lifecycle management systems to keep your data synchronized and prevent duplication. So, whether you need to improve your production workflow and execution, cope with change and quality management, or get visibility on throughput and machine maintenance, get your business future ready with Autodesk Prodsmart.
So let's now talk about how you can start using Prodsmart. We offer a free 14-day trial of Prodsmart. You can go to app.prodsmart.com/sign up, and instantly have access to Prodsmart for the next 14 days. Now you can use it on your own and start playing around with our software. We have tutorials to help you get started and up and running. But if you'd like a little bit more of a catered workflow or a catered service to actually see how this is going to affect your business in particular, I recommend that you reach out to the Prodsmart team here at Autodesk. And for that, I have a whole bunch of different contact informations for you. I have phone numbers and email addresses depending on where you happen to be in the world. If you happen to be in the United States like I am, you can reach us at 1-833-843-3437 or via email at prodsmartsalesnamer@autodesk.com. Namer is short for North America, right? The key here is that we would be happy to meet with you, learn about your business, and really understand your challenges that you're trying to face and solve. And we can show you how Prodsmart is going to be able to solve those needs and more. So please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to work with you. Let's summarize what we covered today. I gave you an overview of data and process at a typical business. I gave you the definitions of all those acronyms that can be so confusing. We talked a little bit about how each of these systems affects your business, including the differences between these systems, right? Doing all of this, the intent was for you to really make sense of how these different systems interact with your business and just to be able to make sense of them because there are too many acronyms and it's hard to keep track. And once we did that, then I was able to give you an introduction to Autodesk Prodsmart, a manufacturing execution system that does even more than just an MES. And we also covered how you can reach the Prodsmart team. I'm going to close out today by just thanking you all for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure to get to present to you this relatively complicated topic and try my best to make this as simple and clear as possible. If you have any questions about anything that you've seen today, please feel free to reach out to us. This, of course, is being recorded and you will get a copy of the recording via email. Look out for the next Prodsmart webinar. Have a good one.